Hey, it's C.S. Joseph with csjoseph.life, doing yet another episode because that seems to be all that I do with my life is constantly shoot YouTube or podcast lectures over and over. But hey, what is there to live for after all, right? Anyway, this is season 15, episode 7, and we're going to be talking about the third tool, basically, that could be utilized in helping determine one's temperament. Now, I will say take this tool with a grain of salt because this tool is probably the hardest one of the three to understand. We first talked about abstraction versus concrete, which is how you tell the difference between someone being a sensor or an intuitive temperament, basically. What we talked about last night in this scary, eerily dark lecture because, I was exiled by my children. And if you notice, I'm doing this in my car. And that's because, still exiled by my children because when my children visit, they take over my home completely, and that's because I live in a very small apartment because the Bay Area, and I'm paying off debt instead of putting myself into debt and having some big house, even though I could technically afford it, but I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to be an intelligent, fiscally responsible human being and pay off all my debt. And I'd actually made a huge headway on that recently, thank God. And I'm getting closer and closer to paying off all my debt every day because I want to be debt free so that no longer can I walk around and be like, wow, that homeless guy over there is probably way better off fiscally than I am. You know what I mean? Don't really like having that experience. So definitely not going to be doing that. Oh, well, now I know where my wallet was because I lost it, and it's in here now. So, okay, found my wallet. Awesome. Anyway, so little disclaimer. We've talked about concrete versus abstract. We talked about affiliative versus pragmatic, and today we're going to be talking about systematic versus motive or interest tonight. And these can be pretty confusing with the temperaments because everyone's like, well, I am pragmatic, or I am affiliative, or I am. Well, let me say this: everybody's everything. That's a fact. Everybody is direct. Everyone is informative. Everyone is responding. Everyone is initiating. Everyone is control. Everyone is movement. Everyone is pragmatic. Everyone is affiliative, everyone is concrete, everyone is abstract, everyone is systematic, everyone is motive focused, right? So what's the point then? Why do we even care if everyone is everything? We care because people, though they are everything, they are they're half of the everything more often than they are the other half. It's about primary versus secondary, right? Primary versus secondary. That's the point. That is the importance. You want primary versus secondary with each of these tools, right? Some people are primarily direct, specifically the in charge or the structure, leadership, interaction style, and also the finishers, the chart the course, see it through types. Those 4 types in that interaction style, they're also direct, right? And the other half of them are informative, where we have the starter types where I'm informative primarily, right? But I still have a direct INTJ shadow, also known as my unconscious. It's direct, right? But my shadow or my unconscious is out less often because I'm primarily in my ego, right? So again, we're just focusing on what is primary. And I noticed actually one of my comments earlier, someone who claims to be an ISTJ is like, but I'm very independent all the time. And if I'm an ISTJ and I'm very pragmatic. And it's like, yeah, I could see the argument for that because the example that she was using is this example of, well, I'm doing classwork and, I would rather do all my classwork by myself because I don't want these people to do that. Okay, yeah, that's to lower my grade. That's classic TE parent. That's very classic TE parent, and that's kind of normal for an ISTJ to have that point of view, and that is actually in a secondary situation because they're in their ESTP shadow or unconscious, who is actually more pragmatic. So to help them deal with the fact that they need to be more independent because their TE parent is aware that these people would be potentially reducing their ability to reducing their grade potentially, they'll want to be more independent, right? But that does not make them primarily pragmatic. That does not make an ISTJ primarily pragmatic, because let me tell you about ISTJs. They're the world's best accountants. They're the world's best lawyers, basically. Why? Because they know about the rules. They know the process. They know about... They know about asking permission, right? And what the rules are as a result of permission, right? From a affiliative standpoint. This is why ISTJs are primarily affiliative, right? But they have an ESTP shadow or unconscious, which just happens to be pragmatic. So that's not to say that an ISTJ can be pragmatic. They can be pragmatic. It's just primarily they are affiliative, okay? So that's the difference. You have to be aware of these primaries and secondaries when it comes to these different tools that you are using to identify somebody's interaction style or identifying someone's temperament. You have to do this in order to have some kind of mastery over the type grid, so that you could utilize the type grid to type someone accurately with 100% accuracy. And then the more you master it, the more you get used to it, the more you understand how people interact with each other and how they communicate and how do they organize their life and what roles they take on, etc. The faster you're able to do it, to the point where you could do it within 30 seconds of meeting somebody like that, right? So you just have to be aware of these different things. You have to be aware of these different nuances, right? It's all about primary and secondary, like a yin and yang equilibrium. Everyone can do everything. It's just, what do they do primarily more? And I know an ISTJ would often argue with me, well, I'm more pragmatic. I'm not affiliative. And it's like, actually you are, because of all the types, you have the highest respect for rules and authority, to be honest. And you're more of the type that's going to ask permission rather than ask forgiveness, because you're not going to put yourself at risk, which means SI hero, you are affiliative. So just be aware of that. Like, I'm just using this ISTJ example because that's what somebody commented on last night's lecture about, which I staunchly, vehemently disagree with. But the reason why is because people get confused between primary versus secondary roles. And remember, we're just focusing on primary because we're trying to identify someone's ego. Once we have identified their ego, we know all four sides of their mind. From that point, we also know all their cognitive functions, and we could get to understanding that person and optimizing our ability to communicate with that person to get the best possible result, right? That's why we do this. This is why we care about type, right? And this helps us in our relationships, our friendships, parenting children, our professional relationships. This helps us in the bedroom. There's a lot of unlimited applications. Wherever more than one human being interacts, oh wait, this also counts towards interacting with yourself. This is why this information, this form of depth psychology, is relevant. So anyway, I think I beat that dead horse pretty well here. So, but, well, it's kind of nice to be actually like filming in a car again. You know what I'm saying? You know, but I mean, you kind of have to do what you got to do, right? So anyway, we're going to be talking about how people focus their attention today. We're going to be talking about being systematic and having systematic attention and focusing your attention on systems, right? Versus focusing your attention based on people's motives or their interests, a very interest focus. So that basically means we have SJs and NTs. They are basically systematic, right? People they utilize frameworks. It's all about systems, right? Whereas, you know, the other folks who are so like the SPs and the NFs, they're more focused on motivation. What interests this person, or why do they do what they do, right? And that's kind of how it goes for, right? That's just how it goes between the two those two different little tools to go between. So, you know, we had so people with their temperament primarily are either very systematic or they are very, you know, focused on motives or focused on interest, right? So about interest focus. It's how you're focusing your attention, right? So again, this is according to the theory as put forward by Dr. Linda Behrens. She wrote the book, Understanding Yourself and Others. It's actually a book series. I recommend you buy them. They are very good. She uses different terminology than what David Kiersey has used or what the MBTI has used or whatever, probably because she doesn't want to get sued, right? Because people do that, you know, and she just doesn't want to get sued or whatever. But I'm not plagiarizing. This is not my own work. How we use interaction styles and the temperaments is all according to Dr. Linda Behrens. This is why I personally completely reject David Keirsey and want to get away from David Keirsey. I completely reject him and his interpretation of the temperaments, and I largely reject the MBTI's everything. Because again, the MBTI is nothing more than a test. That's all it is. It is just a test, nothing else. It is just a test. There is nothing more about MBTI other than the fact that it is just a test, right? And it could, at best, it could ballpark what your type is. It's not guaranteed to work every time. And they've, in my opinion, their relationship with the science has been waffly at best, very flimsy, very tinfoily, because, they constantly, in my opinion, change their content for the sake of, making sales, and that change of content could actually inhibit their ability to get people further and further away from the truth, right? Because they're just trying to sell more tests, they're trying to sell more certifications. It's a business, right? But that doesn't mean they are actually trying to stay as true to the science as they possibly can. So again, when you're thinking about the MBTI, you have to consider it for what it is, a test. That's all the MBTI is. There's nothing else about it. It's just the test, right? So we could practice actual Jungian analytical psychology, or depth psychology, as people call it, and this is where we get Dr. Linda Behrens. Thank God for Dr. Linda Behrens for providing us with this information so we can learn about how to type ourselves and others by using the type grid. And the type grid is a design that came as a result of understanding Dr. Linda Behrens' interpretation of the temperaments versus the interaction styles, right? So then we're able to actually understand how people work and where their temperaments come from, and then what their interaction styles come from, and then like times tables. If we understand their interaction style and we understand the temperament, we instantly know what type they are, like that, with 100% accuracy. Okay, another dead horse that I've just beaten the crap out of. So back to focus, foci. So we have systematic and we have interest-based focus. So let's talk about people who are very systematic. Now, this is not to be confused with people who are control-based, who go at their own pace, who take their time, who kind of need a plan, whatnot, because, and are trying to reduce chaos, because that's just how they get progress in their life. Remember, from a control standpoint, progress cannot come in the midst of chaos. They have to remove the chaos. They have to bring that organization. Being systematic means you think in terms of systems, right? And there's always a kind of framework or a label or a model that you can attach another human being to. That's the point of it, right? So, it's about like putting people or focusing on or paying attention to, okay, what is the order? Or how is this organized? How is this sequenced? How does this put together? How is it built together, right? How does it fit together? Where's the missing puzzle pieces, or where's the place in the puzzle that needs to have a piece added to it, right? That's the kind of focus that a systematic person has. It's important because they have to have some kind of, way of doing things, like a methodology to be able to, deal with life's problems. See, systematic people are very methodical. It's all about methodology. They literally they pay attention to methodologies, and they develop methodologies to solve problems, right? This is how they solve problems constantly. It's all about methodologies. And then they can come up with processes, and if they're a control type, they can implement those processes as plans, for example. If they're a movement type, they could just follow that one process that they have that one time, and then they'll throw it away and then create another one later, right, if they're a movement type. But again, they could still be systematic. So you have NTs and you have SJs who think in terms of these systems, right, who pay attention to systems, or are trying to develop systems, or try to put life or aspects of life into these various frameworks, right? And they could be matrices, like the plural for matrix is matrices. So it could be matrices, it could be rules, social norms, professional norms. Like here's an example of a professional norm that is systematic. You always make sure you are dressed up to properly for a job interview. So if you notice something, statistically, if you look at someone who's getting a job interview, and this is also, I have a lot of anecdotal evidence because I've hired people. I've also gone to job interviews with other people at the same time where we had like group interviews and whatnot, and I've seen this. So I've experienced it personally, and many other people I know have also seen this as well. But when you go to a job interview, wow, my allergies are just like terrible right now. It's probably because like I'm outside. Oh my gosh, it's just bad right now. That's why I keep like rolling down this window. But anyway, bear with me here. So, job interviews. Okay, so here's an example of being systematic versus, interest or motive based with your focus of attention. So, an SP and an NF shows up to a job interview, or an SJ and an NT show up for a job interview. What are they wearing? So the SJ and the NT, they're looking sharp. They're there to make an absolute really nice first impression, right? Statistically, the majority of the time they're really well dressed. They got their hair done. They're super professional. They're kind of overdressed in that way. Maybe they're wearing a suit. Who knows? But they're really dressed to impress. The NTs and SJs take that very seriously. However, statistically, I've watched. Statistically, NFs and SPs don't always do that. I have seen NFs and SPs show up to job interviews in a Hawaiian shirt, or wearing shorts, or just wearing just a random button-up shirt, that was not tucked in or whatever. You know what I mean? I've seen that happen, right? Now, obviously, that doesn't always happen. There's plenty of SPs and NFs who have figured that out. But earlier in life, if they've had less job interviews over their life, they kind of really don't understand the whole, norm of getting a job and following this process that everyone, the systematic people figure out with this framework of job interviews. Hey, there's this framework and there's this process that you should do if you are going to get a job, right? That's culturally acceptable, right? Because we're very systematic and we understand the systems of culture, right? Whereas an SP and NF is like, I don't care about the systems of culture. It's like, all I know is what I want to do, or what I'm motivated to do here, and I'm motivated to get a job right now, so I'm going to do it. Now, sometimes they recognize that after failing to get a job a few times, that they probably should dress up for that, and then like, okay, now I'm motivated because it wasn't so easy for me to get a job, so now I'm actually going to dress really well for it, right? Whereas, it's more of a default method that is followed by the systematic types, which are SJs and NTs. They're very systematic. They have all these methodologies, right? And they're very, that way. I am that way. I am very systematic. I mean, I'm talking about Jungian analytical psychology, and I'm presenting a system or models and methodologies to you folks as my audience on a regular basis, right? This is what I do, right? So you can kind of see how I'm very system-based. NTs and SJs are very system-based as a result. That's not to say SPs and NFs are not. Again, they have the ability to be system-based. Oh, but wait, that's secondary. It's not default. It's not primary. They don't do it by default, right? Again, when I say primary versus secondary, primary also means default, right? SPs and NFs do not default follow these methodologies, particularly when getting a job or just basically doing anything, because guess what? It could be different this time. It really could be different this time. Whereas with NTs and SJs, no, we have a method we have an expectation. We understand what's going to, what's at stake here. We're going to make it happen. And yes, it's not going to be different this time. We're going to do it the same expected way that it really should be, right? So that's what it means to be systematic in that way. So if things are not systematic, like when you take someone who is systematic and they're not systematic, right? Or they go in a situation where there's like a clear lack of structure, right? There's a clear lack of process, a clear lack of rules. It's just like total anarchy. They can't really function as well. Now that's funny because I know a lot of SJs who politically they would actually like ISTJs and ESTPs, they would be definitely all for anarchy. They would appreciate that absolute libertarian approach. And that's fine. But even then, at the end of the day, when you talk to them about it, they would recognize, well, yeah, we do need some loose structure here and there. And they would still agree that, yes, a structure would be good, right? Whereas an NF would probably argue for like a commune, where it is technically more anarchist to have like just a bunch of little communes everywhere instead of just one grand commune, right? Tribal, right? You know what I'm saying? So just to kind of give you a difference there. Yeah, it's about outlines and rules and norms and methodologies and models when it comes to a systematic person, right? And they care about, like, what's the order of things, how are things organized, very org chart, right? SJs and NTs could probably create an org chart for their family, right? And or their church, or anything. Anything could be like, people are here, people are there. There's always some kind of loose framework or loose method or loose process involved with, what they pay attention to, right? So that's just kind of where they are. They get although there is a weakness to being systematic. Like, you could be really focused on the details, but you can get really focused on the details, but you could also miss out on like the purpose behind, like, why people are doing things, like the purpose behind people's behavior, right? It's kind of like you're looking at the forest, but you miss the trees, right? Seeing the forest, but missing the trees. And that can be a problem for systematic people, because sometimes people do not always apply to their methodologies. Sometimes people do not always apply to their systems, right? And that can be an issue. That's why SPs oftentimes have to test the rules and test the norms, because they're like, I don't think I apply to that system. And, this is really prevalent in ESTPs and ISTPs, because those two types, they exist like, okay, rules exist to be tested. I need to break this rule to see if this rule is worth having, right? I need to see what the consequences of my actions are to see if this rule is worth having. Okay, great. I found this rule. I've tested this rule. Yeah, I probably shouldn't have done that. I understand why this rule exists now, right? It's different. They're not systematic, right? Whereas systematic folks, SJs and NTs, have a higher respect for the rules, a higher respect for the norms, but the SPs and NFs, no, because to them the rules are kind of arbitrary, right? They can be really, really arbitrary. This is more primary, right? Secondarily, obviously, yes, they see that some rules are absolutely necessary. It's up to their personal choice at the end of the day, but that's a secondary outlook. I'm talking about what's primary here, right? So let's switch over to the interest and motive of the other people. And basically, it just comes down to, like, what do other people, what interests other people? Like, what is their interest? What are they trying to get out of this, right? So the SPs and NFs do this thing. They're constantly like, okay, well, what's in it for me? What's in it for this other person? And that's kind of what they're focused on, when having a conversation. They're not really focused on this framework or methodology, because every interaction with each human being or anything that happened could be new this time around, right? And because it's new this time around, we have to be aware of, oh, hey, this person might have an agenda. I have my own agenda, so because I know I have my agenda with what I want to do here, or what experience I'm looking to receive, other people have that as well, right? Again, that's not to say that SJs and NTs do this. They do that too. It's just a secondary function. It's not, or a secondary trait. It's not primary. It's not default to them, right? So they're like, okay, well, what's in it for you? Like, that question is, it's probably the best way that I could use to describe an interest-focused person, because they're trying to figure out what interests other people have in a given social situation, or what person's interest or agenda is, if you talk to an SP, they're like, okay, well, what's the experience that this person's trying to get from me right now? Or you talk to an NF, and it could be that same thing. What's the experience they're trying to get from me? Or it could be like, if you're an NP, or an NFP, you could be like, okay, well, what do they want? Like, what's their angle here? What's their agenda, right? And those are for the more interest based people, these people, they're most comfortable when intentions or motives or interests, people's interests are very clear. They want those things up front and clear, because they use that as a boundary to organize their life. Instead of using a methodology to organize their life or as a boundary, they use the interests of other people, because once they know what the interests of other people is, they know that they have a framework from which to work with based on someone else's interest, instead of just living by a generally accepted framework or methodology, like the common methodology used to get a job. You dress very well, you have a resume, you have a cover letter, you have your references, you have your LinkedIn profile, etc. That's the methodical, normal way of doing things from the systematic point of view. But an interest-focused person is more like, hey, here's what I want out of it, here's what you want out of it. Okay, now that I know what you're interested in, I can get it for you, and it's very transactional, right? It's very transactional. Every interaction is on a case-by-case basis, and it's very transactional. I know what that person is interested in this situation, and I can get it for him. That maybe give me power, or maybe we could do a trade, or I know what I know what I'm interested in. I could share that with this other person, and then maybe they're motivated to help me, or maybe I'm motivated to help me. It's all about motivation with interest-focused people. Whereas systematic-focused people, it's more about methodology, rules, norms are what kind of more motivate them to do things. Structure or frameworks, matrices, scaffolding, with their interactions, kind of like what my cousin would call putting people in boxes, right? Because they're following rules, they're following procedure. It's very procedure focused from a systematic person, and human interaction is based on some kind of procedure. I don't know how many times an SJ has told me, well, put together a proposal and let's see what you can do. And it's like, I don't want to put together a proposal. I just want to actually tell you about it and give my elevator pitch and then see how you feel about it or see what you think about it. No, but they want me to actually literally write them out in an official proposal and give it to them. You know what I mean? Stresses out. my ESFP superego, but the other sides of my mind are like, okay, yeah, I could do that, and then I do. I put together a proposal, and then I can convince the SJ to give me money, or I could convince them to do whatever, because, the proposal itself is what they need to be convinced, right? Whereas with an SP and NF, I have to state up front, yeah, I want your money. Yes, I'm trying to persuade you that I want your money. And, they want it out front, right? Because then it sets expectations, right? It's all about level setting expectations with interest-based people, because your expectations are based on the interests of other human beings, not based on norms, not based on accepted rules or accepted situations. Now, a lot of people would argue with me, well, I'm an NT. I'm not like SJs where I'm very accepted on norms, like this. Actually, yes, you are. Have you ever heard of the scientific method? NTs often espouse the scientific method, and guess what? That's a norm. That's a method. That's a model. It's just your norms and methods and models are manifesting differently than would for SJs, right? It's more strategy focused, right? Whereas SJs, it's just more commonly accepted, common sense rules and norms and outlines. That's just kind of how it is. It's different for them, right? But for interest-based people, it's even beyond that. Again, they still need to understand that, people's interests are clear. It has to be clear. All the guesswork has to be removed. Constantly has to be removed. Gosh, my nose is just itching like crazy. I guess this is like the nose itch show. You know what I mean? Not exactly ideal. So, and the way NFs approach, the way that they approach their interest focus is that they're trying to find the greater meaning or the deeper purpose behind what's happening. So when they're looking at people's interests, they're like, okay, what's the meaning of this? What's the hidden meaning here? What's the purpose of this? What's the point of this, right? Because the point can be different. What's the point of this rule or norm or methodology? What is the point of this person talking to me right now? What's their game, right? What's their interest? What are they not telling me? Or, I just really need to know. And sometimes it's not even nefarious like that. It's like, oh, I just need to know what they want so I can get it for them. So there's no guessing anymore. Or I just want to know what would make them feel better so that I could have a better relationship with them. It's those types of things. It's those types of considerations that are really important, right? So it's not a bad thing. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're constantly questioning other people for their intentions or motives or whatever, kind of like an extrovert intuition nemesis person would do. But which would be like an INTJ and INFJ would technically do that. That's not what I'm saying. It's just that they need to understand the interests of people around them, especially those closest to them, so that they know how to interact with those people, right? As part of their temperament. They are an idealist, right? So they need to know what other people's interests are so that they could act ideally. So that because they know what people are interested in, okay, I know this person A, and I know what this person's interests are, and I want to provide the ideal solution to this person, but I can't provide them the ideal solution until I know what they're interested in, right? Again, that's why it is very important for, people to do that. It's the same thing with SPs. It's like, you're trying to get me to give you a good experience here. Maybe I'm building something for you. Maybe we're working on something together, right? Maybe I'm building your house or whatever, and I'm an SP, and I'm doing it with my own hands or whatever. I need to know what it is you want me to build, right? Because they need to know what your interests are. Oh, are you interested in having me build it this way? Are you interested in having it to be 2 stories or 3 stories? Tell me what you want, man. Tell me what experience you're trying to receive here so I could build it for you, right? Tell me what your ideal situation is so I could bring you your ideal. That's what an idealist is trying to do, right? They're just trying to do it from 4 different directions because there's 4 different types, right? That's what it means to be interest focused, right? So it's all about trying to find that deep purpose behind a behavior. The problem is that they don't really keep track of all the details. So okay, yes, I have the purpose behind this behavior or this interaction with this fellow human being, but they're not really paying attention to the details, and some things can be lost in translation, which can lead to miscommunication. Where with a systematic person, it's like, okay, I have all the details, but I've lost the deep purpose, and they get caught up in the details, and then they don't even know what the purpose of the interaction is to begin with. And then all of a sudden they're kind of going off on tangents a little bit sometimes. And it's like, oh, wait a minute. No. The actual issue is this. Oh, why didn't you say so? And it's like, but I did say so. But they just get caught up in the minutia, right? So it's different. Systematic people are focused on minutia, whereas the interest-based people are focused on the purpose. What's the point? What is the point of us doing this right now? And you can almost kind of see them tapping their foot a little bit as they're waiting for you to get to the point, right? I'm sure SPs are like, yeah, that's totally me. Get to the point. Speak, man, speak. I don't have all day, right? So that's just kind of another interesting point of view. So, yeah, so again, systematic people, it's about rules, norms, strategies, methodologies, minutia, whereas interest-focused people, they're more focused on the deep purpose behind behaviors, the why people do what they do, what interests these people. They need those interests to be able to build the house or create the ideal situation. Where a systematic person needs to, okay, in order for me to be organized or to help you organize, we need to have some kind of system. We need to have some kind of methodology here. The scientific method is one of them, or the tax code is another one for you STJs out there, or physical fitness, like the process to reach physical fitness. ESTJs care about that a lot. Or procedure on how to care for somebody, in a hospital for those ESFJs who are nurses, right? Again, these are just loose examples, right? And again, everyone does everything. There are NTs who have other sides of their mind who are more interest focused, right? But those are secondary traits. Remember, it's primary versus secondary, guys. I'm trying to talk about what people do by default, or what they do first, or what they do primarily the majority of the time. And SJs and NTs are systematic. And SPs and NFs are interest focused. So you're systems focused or you're interest focused, right? And that's the difference between the two. So let's look at some examples. We're going to type someone right now. And let's say that I'm a woman and I'm interested in dating a man. And I'm a woman, and I came across an INTP, and I happen to be an ENTJ woman. I've been very successful, and you know, we have this really good relationship or whatnot, and but you know, I'm kind of not. I'm losing interest in him, and then all of a sudden, I'm going to be going for his friend, right? Well, you don't know what type this friend is, so you start interacting with them and you're like, okay, wow, he's really informative. Okay, just like my other friend that I was kind of interested in, but I'm not anymore. And he's just introducing me because we're just still friends or whatever to this other guy. And this other guy, okay, yeah, he's informative, great. So he's either starter type or he's behind the scenes or background type. So okay, starter or background, good to go. And then okay, so I'll keep talking to him. Okay, oh wow, he's moving really quick and he's really darting through all of ideas, and I could definitely keep track with that. So he's definitely movement oriented. Awesome. So he's a starter type. Great. So we've confirmed starter type. So he's either an ESFJ, ESFP, ENTP, and ENFP, right? And then I talked to him more. Okay, he's very abstract. Okay, great. So then he's definitely an ENTP or a ENFP. But he's constantly talking about systems and methodologies, and talking about the process by which he changes oil on his car, talking about this new program that he's been working on with certain people. And he's telling me about the 4 pillars of self-intimacy for some reason. But again, that's a method, that's a system, right? You know what I'm saying? Oh, okay. So he's very systems focused. Well, that means he's an NT, ergo he is an ENTP, right? And great. Oh, he's an ENTP. I'm really super compatible with an ENTP. That's definitely someone I want to be in a relationship with. I'm going to ask him out to coffee. And then they do, and then off to the races, and it's a great relationship, right? Because, you know, coffee is that great, apparently. But you get my point, right? In this, you know, interesting example. Or you could do it backwards, you know, the same thing like with an INTP, you know. They're very systems focused. They're abstract, right? And they're pragmatic, very independent. This ENTP in this situation would be pragmatic as well. So all you have to do is utilize these different tool sets, compare and contrast each of the tools within the 3 different levels, you know, because we have at the top concrete and abstract, and then we have pragmatic versus affiliative, we have systematic versus interest, right? Interests. And once you have those 3 things, you can identify anybody's temperament using those 3 different tools. And then identifying their interaction styles, it's direct versus informative, it's control versus movement, and initiating versus responding. You have those 3 tools as well, and to figure out their interaction style. And all you have to do with the type grid is identify their interaction style and identify their temperament. And then like times tables, you instantly know which type they are. Bingo, like that. So anyway, we're going to be doing, I'm actually going to be doing another lecture, the next episode of this lecture series. It may be the final one, or it might not be the final one. I may add some bonus lectures to it. But it's going to be in front of a whiteboard, where I'm going to be whiteboarding out the type grid, and we're going to be doing some examples, and you're going to see how all of this information fits together. So we could literally type any type of any person that we come into contact with using the grid and using all these tools, and you'll see exactly where it fits and how the information flows from point to point on the grid. And you know, just so that everyone understands, okay, oh, okay, yeah, that's where direct fits. Oh, okay, yeah, that's where pragmatic fits. Oh, okay, yeah, that's where systematic fits, you know. So you can understand where it is, where they belong, and then use it for yourself. When you do a couple loose examples and just see how it all fits together in general, right? That way, you could utilize these lectures for the definitions of each of these tools, but then you can use the final lecture in this series, just kind of a general overview of how it all works so that you could use the type grid, and also include the link of where you can download the type grid after that lecture. So, which would basically be the homepage of my website. Yeah, that's where you can get it. I'm also going to have a new type grid redone and republished that includes all this updated additional information from Dr. Linda Barron's on the type grid, so that you guys can utilize that as a free resource to be able to figure out, okay, hey, this is how the type grid works, this is what I need to do, etc. So anyway, this lecture is a little bit longer because it's kind of difficult to explain the difference between systematic or interest focused people. So it requires a lot of additional definitions, etc. So I just wanted to spend a little bit more time with it. And also, being that I'm in a car, just kind of wanted to like get it all out as much as possible and kind of beat some of the dead horses that we've been having. I added that little disclaimer because we were having a little bit of confusion, but I think the next overview lecture that I'll be doing to complete this lecture series, which will be episode 8. In episode 8, I think we should be able to have all of the misunderstandings quelled, and everyone should understand how to use the type grid basically by the end of this lecture series, season 15. So, awesome. So if you found this lecture useful, helpful, educational, enlightening, insightful, and I'm sure I'm going to come up with a new adjective eventually, leave a like on the channel, on this lecture, and subscribe. Please subscribe to the channel here on YouTube and also on the podcast while you're at it. We're on iTunes and like Spotify and Google Play. If you haven't joined the Discord server yet, the link is in the description. If you haven't joined our meetup group yet and are in the Bay Area, California, towards San Francisco, or will be visiting it sometime soon, go ahead and join the meetup group as well. And if you would like to join the meetup group and start up a CSJ-related meetup group somewhere else in the country, join the meetup group and then contact me, and we'll definitely have a conversation about what we can do to get that started. So, again, if you have any questions or concerns about what it is to be systematic or interest-based, interest-focused, please leave it in the comments section below, and I'll do my best to answer your questions or concerns. And yeah, so awesome. I think I'll have episode 8 out tomorrow, and then I begin my trip to Ohio, and yeah, that'll be interesting. So I will see you guys tomorrow. With that being said, have a good night.